I have always been a big fan of horror movies, especially those from the 1980s. In my opinion, they were much better and more hardcore compared to the current ones. While there are occasional good horror movies nowadays, they don't quite capture the same level of fun and excitement as the older ones. Back then, there was a lot more gore, practical effects, and less reliance on CGI. The movies had a gritty and intense feel to them, unlike the more PG-13 horror films we often see these days. During weekends, I used to rent several movies, many of which were direct-to-video releases. I would have a movie marathon in my basement bedroom, as my family wasn't into these types of films like I was. It didn't bother me, though, as I enjoyed watching them by myself. When I was around 16 years old, I rented another batch of movies to watch. Among them were The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which surprisingly I hadn't seen until then, The Hills Have Eyes, and a cheap indie film called Dead Time Stories. While none of them seemed particularly scary to me, that wasn't the main point. I had a vivid imagination and liked to challenge myself to get scared easily. After finishing watching the movies, it was already well past 2 a.m. Feeling hungry, I went upstairs to the main house to grab a snack. I spent about 40 minutes there because we weren't allowed to eat in our bedrooms. When I returned to the basement to go to bed, I started feeling apprehensive. The basement was completely dark, and I couldn't see anything until I was halfway down the steps. Walking down, I felt extremely nervous and regretted not turning on the lights beforehand. When I was about 4 steps from the bottom, I couldn't take it anymore, and I jumped the rest of the way down, quickly flipping on the lights. It was strange because I couldn't explain why I felt so frightened. I assumed it was just the lingering effect of the movies I had watched. Glancing at the clock on my nightstand, I saw that it was 3 a.m. I contemplated turning off the light and rushing to my bed to sleep. I thought it would be silly to be scared, and the sooner I went to bed, the faster morning would come. However, I couldn't bring myself to turn off the light. Each time I tried, I hesitated and eventually decided that daylight would arrive in a couple of hours, so I left the lights on and decided to watch a comedy to calm myself down. I turned on the lamp on my nightstand and turned off the overhead lights. Only the area around my bed remained illuminated. I didn't have many comedy movies, so I ended up watching an extremely bad film called The Pirate Movie, which I had seen multiple times. As I watched, my eyes kept shifting towards the basement windows. They were those basement windows where a hole was dug into the ground to let in some light. I also glanced nervously at the closet. For some reason, I had never felt this nervous before, especially after watching relatively mild movies. I couldn't pinpoint why I was so scared. Around 4 a.m., something suddenly caught my attention. I turned my gaze to the window and noticed that it was slightly open. I wondered if that was why I felt so paranoid. Perhaps on a subconscious level, I knew it was open. I got out of bed and walked towards the window to close it. However, about halfway there, I heard a shuffling sound coming from my closet. There was no doubt that someone was inside. I completely forgot about the window and ran out of the basement, screaming for my parents to wake up and call the police. My dad, hearing my panicked screams, quickly grabbed his gun and rushed down to the basement. Together, we caught the intruder in the act as he was attempting to climb out of the window. Later, when the police arrived, they questioned the man, and he admitted to breaking into the basement while I was upstairs getting a snack. He thought the basement was empty and had hidden in the closet when he heard me coming back down. The darkness had concealed his presence, and he had been patiently waiting for me to fall asleep. I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened if I had gone to bed without realizing someone was lurking in my own home. It was an unsettling experience, knowing that someone had been watching me from inside my own sanctuary, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Thankfully, the situation ended without harm, thanks to the fortunate timing of my discovery. It was a stark reminder of the potential dangers that can lurk even in familiar surroundings. From that day on, I made sure to be extra cautious and vigilant about my surroundings, especially when it came to securing my home. That night left a lasting impression on me, reinforcing my love for horror movies while also instilling a newfound awareness of personal safety. It was a chilling reminder that reality can sometimes be just as terrifying as the fictional horrors portrayed on the screen.